All right, so Hollywood, right? Sunshine, palm trees, yeah, all that glitz and glamour. But we're not here to talk about the Walk of Fame.
No, not today.
Today, we're going behind the mask.
That's right. We're diving into the Deadly Women episode you sent over.
Behind the mask. And let me tell you, these women, they're as cunning as they are chilling. 3 cases, each one more unbelievable than the last.
What gets me about these cases, especially the first one, is how these women weaponize their image. I mean, we're talking about Helen and Olga here. They were practically local heroes, known for helping the homeless.
Yeah, the Good Samaritans. But then, bam, they're taking out million-dollar life insurance policies on these same people they're supposed to be helping.
It's like something out of a nightmare. And what's even more disturbing is the level of premeditation involved. These women, they weren't just opportunistic, they were methodical. They kept those insurance policies active for the required 2 years, all the while playing the role of compassionate caregivers. Talk about a wolf in sheep's clothing.
So how did they manage to fool everyone for so long? I mean, no one suspected a thing.
Well, that's the thing about manipulation. It thrives in the shadows, preying on vulnerability. And these women, they specifically targeted individuals who were already marginalized, less likely to be believed if they ever spoke out. Let's be honest, they exploited society's perception of the elderly as harmless.
It's terrifying how easily they were able to blend in, gain people's trust, all while plotting their demise. So, how did the whole thing unravel? What tipped off investigators?
It all started with Kenneth McDavid.
He was one of the homeless individuals, right?
Yeah, one of the ones they had an insurance policy on. His death, it was initially ruled as a hit and run. Tragic accident, or so it seemed.
But something wasn't adding up.
Exactly. The circumstances surrounding the accident were just a little too convenient.
So the police start digging, and what do they find?
Well, they uncover a pattern of similar incidents connected to Helen and Olga. People they'd helped, who met it with untimely and suspicious ends.
All with those hefty life insurance policies.
You got it. But suspicion is one thing. They needed hard evidence to put these women away.
That's where the forensics come in, right?
Bingo. And the details are chilling. They found traces of a powerful sedative in one of the victims' systems. Turns out it was a sedative that Helen had access to through her volunteer work.
Talk about a smoking gun.
And if that wasn't enough, they found McDavid's DNA on Helen's car.
Busted.
Oh, it gets worse. During the investigation, it comes out that this wasn't their first attempt. Years earlier, they pulled off a similar scheme with another homeless man, Paul Vados.
You're kidding? They got away with it.
It's likely that Vados' death, like McDavid's, was initially dismissed as just another tragic but random occurrence. It's sadly common when it comes to cases involving the homeless. But this time they had a pattern, and the forensic evidence was undeniable.
It's chilling to think that if it weren't for the investigators' diligence, they might still be out there preying on the vulnerable. Their story is a stark reminder that justice often requires a fight, especially for those who can't fight for themselves.
Talk about predators hiding in plain sight, right? This next case takes us from the streets of Hollywood to a seemingly quiet diner.
Betty Lou, right? This one's got Black Widow written all over it, married 5 times, and each husband, well, let's just say she had a type.
And a motive, it seems. Often financial, though there can be other factors at play. Power, control. It's a complex psychological profile.
Well, whatever it was, it worked for her. At least for a while. 5 husbands, all meeting untimely ends. You have to wonder how she pulled it off.
Black widows, they're often described as having this chameleon-like quality. They adapt, they become whoever their victim wants them to be. In Betty Lou's case, she was the charming waitress, the girl next door. Harmless, approachable, but underneath.
A stone-cold killer. So Jimmy Don, husband number 5, he was a fire captain, about to retire. I mean, talk about bad luck.
He thought he was about to start his happily ever after. But Betty Lou, she had other plans. And here's the thing about these women. They don't just deceive their partners. They often involve their own families, drawing their children into this web of manipulation.
You're right. Her own children were implicated in her crimes. Talk about family secrets. But let's get back to the victims. We can't forget about them. And that wishing well, it's almost too gruesome to believe. What do you make of that?
The wishing well. Such a potent symbol, isn't it? On the surface, it's all about hope, dreams for the future. But in this case, it becomes twisted, corrupted, a burial ground for her victims.
It's like something out of a horror movie. You'd think someone would have noticed, right? I mean, 2 bodies buried in her backyard.
It's easier said than done, especially when you consider the hold she had over people, the power of manipulation, of carefully constructed lies.
So how did it all come crashing down? Did someone finally put the pieces together?
It was a combination of things. Rumors, suspicions, people had their doubts about Betty Lou, but it was ultimately a careless slip-up on her part that led to her arrest.
What did she do?
She boasted, bragged to a new boyfriend about her husband's disappearance. Talk about arrogance.
Wow. So her own words came back to haunt her. And to think she tried to blame her own children during the trial? Unbelievable.
It's a classic case of a psychopath shifting blame, refusing to take responsibility for their actions. It's a chilling reminder that for some people, empathy is simply absent. They see others as pawns in their game.
It's a good thing she was caught. From one chilling case to another, let's move on to our final case. From charming waitress to a devoted wife, huh? It's amazing how these women were able to fool everyone.
It really makes you think twice about who you can trust, right?
It really does. And this next case, it's about as twisted as they come. Valentine's Day weekend. Should be a time for, love and romance.
Hearts and flowers.
Exactly. But for Kim and Steve Rico, well, their story had a much darker ending.
Their case really highlights how dangerous unchecked jealousy can be. And when you add in the desire for control, well, that's when things can turn deadly.
Yeah, it's a scary thought. So Kim and Steve, they head off to a Maryland resort for a Valentine's Day getaway. And at first glance, they seem like any other couple, right? Just looking for a little escape. But behind the smiles and the posed pictures,
There was a whole lot more going on. For one, Kim was having an affair with a young Marine sergeant. And while infidelity is a betrayal, it doesn't automatically equal murder. Right. But in this case, it speaks to a deeper issue. Kim wasn't happy. She wanted out.
But instead of, having a conversation with her husband, trying to work things out, she chose a much darker path.
She sure did. Because on that Valentine's Day weekend, a fire broke out in their hotel room. And when firefighters arrived, well, they found Steve dead inside.
Oh, man, that's awful.
It was a tragedy, or so it seemed. At first, everyone assumed it was just a horrible accident. But investigators, they started noticing things didn't quite add up.
What kind of things? What didn't add up?
Well, for starters, the autopsy revealed Steve didn't die in the fire.
He didn't.
He was poisoned. Succinylcholine. It's a powerful muscle relaxant. Paralyzes you.
How awful.
And guess what? Kim just happened to be a surgical technician. She had access to that drug.
No way. She used her knowledge, her job to
get rid of her husband? It's chilling, isn't it? The level of premeditation and the way succinylcholine works. It's horrifying. It paralyzes you, but you're fully conscious the whole time.
So he knew what was happening.
It's terrifying to think about.
Yeah.
And to make matters worse, she set the fire to cover her tracks. If it weren't for those investigators, she might have gotten away with it too.
Unbelievable. And what about their daughter? That's the real tragedy here. She lost both parents that day.
It just goes to show, actions have consequences.
Yeah.
And sometimes those consequences are far-reaching and utterly devastating.
These cases, they've been a lot.
They really have. But they're important, They remind us that evil can lurk anywhere, even in the most ordinary places.
It's a scary thought, but it's a reality we have to face. Well, that's it for this week's deep dive into the world of deadly women. Join us next time for another look at the dark side of human nature.